Welcome to Module 3 on fraction operations. Right now, make sure you're pausing the video, find a writing utensil and a piece of paper. Don't forget that a spiral-bound notebook is what you'll need for this course. If you don't have one, you need to let your teacher know today. Note-taking will be important so that you have access to what you're learning without having to rewatch all the videos. Don't forget you can also use your notes on your quizzes and on the final, so it's in your best interest to take good notes during this time. I know this looks like a lot, but some of these skills are going to go pretty quickly. We're essentially going to work our way through adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions today. We want to start by being able to find the least common denominator. So right now at the top of your piece of paper, I want you to write finding the least common denominator. You actually don't need to write of two fractions. You can find the least common denominator. And then from now on, you can abbreviate least common denominator with LCD so that you remember what it is. So the LCD is the same thing as the least common multiple. So in our lesson on factors and multiples, we learned that we find multiples by multiplying, and it works the same way for a least common denominator. Essentially, I'm finding my two denominators. So for this question, it's 2 and 8, and I want to find the least common multiple of 2 and 8. Well, some of you already know that answer right away. Some of you think it's 16 because you multiplied 8 times 2, but that wouldn't be the smallest one. If I count by 2's, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and count by 8's, oh, I can stop. I don't need to go on to 16 and 24 because I can already see that my least common multiple is 8. So now I'm going to take each of my fractions, 1/2, and I want to turn that into something over 8. Oh, we actually don't need to do this. We're just finding the least common denominator, so I stop there. My answer is 8. I don't need to go any farther. You pause the video and find the least common denominator of the next two. All right, we're only looking at denominators. The denominators are 5 and 10. If I count by 5's, 5, 10, 15, and so on. I can keep going later if I need to. The multiples of 10 are 10, 20, which I actually can stop because my least common denominator is 10. Using 50 is unnecessary and too big, so we're not multiplying to find our least common denominator. We're looking at the common multiples. All right, I want you to add a new section to your notebook, addition and subtraction of fractions. You don't need to write down that it's different denominators. So to add and subtract fractions, we need to change our fractions to a common denominator. So you might want to write this down. And remember, you can always abbreviate, like you can use plus and minus for subtract. So pause the video right now and write down that to add and subtract fractions, we need to change the fractions to a common denominator. So for this one, I'm looking for a common denominator for 5 and 10, and we already did this just a second ago. If I count by 5's, it's 5, 10, 15. If I count by 10's, it's 10, 20, 30. I already found the common denominator, it's 10. So now I want to change each of these to a common denominator. The denominator that I want to change these to is 10. 5 times 2 made 10, so I need to do the same thing to the numerator. 3 times 2 becomes 6. This one doesn't change at all. 10 times 1 is just 10. 3 times 1 is 3. You don't need to write the time. You can if you want to. Now when we add, we just add our numerators. 6 plus 3 becomes 9, and we leave this as 9/10. You pause the video and try this one now. You should have found a common denominator of 10, so we're changing 2/5 and 3/10 into a common denominator of 10. 5 times 2 is 10, 2 times 2 is 4. 10 times 1 is 10, 3 times 1 is 3. So we're multiplying the numerator by the same thing that we multiplied the denominator by. Be careful because this time we're subtracting. 4 take away 3, so what we're doing is 4/10 take away 3/10. 4 take away 3 is 1, and we always leave our denominators the same. Sometimes we will have to reduce, so you don't need a new title for this. We're still under adding and subtracting fractions and changing our fractions to a common denominator. We do need to find a common multiple for 10 and 6 before we start. We can't add and subtract fractions with different denominators. So if I count by 10's, it's 10, 20, 30, 40. I might need to keep going, but we'll try that again here in just a second. 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, 6 times 3 is 18, 6 times 4 is 24, 6 times 5 is 30. There it is, my common denominator. If you just multiplied 10 and 6, you would have gotten 60, and that's a much too large number to use. So now we're changing 3/10 and 5/6 into a common denominator of 30. Whatever you multiply the denominator by is what you multiply your numerator by. 10 times 3 is 30, so 3 times 3 is 9. 6 times 5 is 30, so 5 times 5 is 25. Pay attention to whether you're adding or subtracting. In this case, they're asking us to add. So if you want to rewrite this, it's 9 over 30 plus 25 over 30. 9 plus 25 is 24, and that's 24 over 30. And you always want to check at the end. If you put 24 over 30 in as your answer, it's going to get marked wrong because it can be reduced. We want to think about what 24 over 30 can be reduced by. Both top and bottom are divisible by 3. So this becomes 8 over 10 as my final answer. You pause the video and try this one on your own now using this one as an example. If we look for our common multiple, it is 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48. I might need to keep going, but for now we'll stop. For 5s, it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. There we go. We got our common multiple, which is 40. This time it would have worked to multiply 8 times 5. That just doesn't always work. So now I'm turning 7/8 and 3/5 into a common denominator. Remember, this is like cutting our pizza up into the same size slices. 8 times 5 is 40. 7 times 5 is 35. 5 times 8 is 40. 3 times 8 is 24. And then pay attention to whether you're adding or subtracting. This time we're subtracting, so we're doing 35 over 40 minus 24 over 40. 5 minus 4 is 1. 3 minus 2 is 1. 11 over 40 is my final answer there. There's nothing that 11 and 40 can both be divided by. 11 is prime, which means it's only divisible by 1 in itself, so we stop there. All right, I want you to give a new heading in your notebook. Product of a fraction and a whole number. Remember, product means we're multiplying here. So when we're talking about product, we're talking about multiplying. You might want to write yourself some notes. You don't have to write all of this word for word. To multiply a fraction and a whole number, we must change the whole number to a fraction by giving it a denominator of 1. I strongly recommend that you write this down. Change the whole number to a fraction by giving it a common denominator of 1. And then we can reduce these fractions by canceling common factors. It is not necessary to find a common denominator to multiply fractions. You do not need a common denominator just to add and subtract. You can multiply and divide anything you want. So if I'm doing 2/9 times 36 over 1, I can simplify ahead of time, either top to bottom or diagonally. There's nothing that 2 and 9 are both divisible by, but there is something that 36 and 9 are both divisible by. 36 and 9 are both divisible by 9. So I can go ahead and do what we call canceling these. 36 divided by 9 becomes 4. So what I have now is 2 over 1, because 9 divided by 9 was 1, and 4 over 1. I multiply straight across, and I get 8 over 1, which is just 8. You pause the video and try this one on your own. Remember, you're changing 64 to 64 over 1. 3 over 8 can't be reduced. 3 over 1 can't be reduced, but 64 over 8 can. 64 divided by 8. What we're left with now, because 8 divided by 8 is 1, is 3 over 1 times 8 over 1, which is just 24 over 1, which is just 24 there. Make sure you pause the video and write all this down before you move on. Now, fraction multiplication, new heading here, fraction multiplication. And then you might want to write down multiply straight across. I want you to take out of your vocabulary cross multiply. It is not mathematically correct to say cross multiply. Cross multiply is something that we use to solve proportions. And remember, we don't need a common denominator to multiply and divide, only to add and subtract. So we've got 3/8 times 7/8. Top to bottom, nothing that can be reduced. 7 over 8, nothing that can be reduced. Diagonally, nothing that can be reduced. So I'm ready to multiply straight across. 3 times 7 is 21. 8 times 8 is 64. And then if I've done this correctly, there shouldn't be any need to reduce because I should have already taken care of all the reducing here. But let's just double check. Is there anything that 21 and 64 can both be divided by? Well, 21 is divisible by 3 and 7, and 64 is not divisible by either one. 21 is also divisible by 21, and 64 is not divisible by 21. So we're done here. You pause the video and try this one on your own now. All right, we should have checked top to bottom, nothing to simplify here, nothing to simplify here, nothing to simplify diagonally. So I'm ready to multiply straight across, not cross multiply. 6 times 4 is 24, 7 times 5 is 35. If you've reduced correctly within this problem, there shouldn't be anything to reduce here, so you should have gotten 24 over 35. You don't need a new heading, we're still in the same topic of fraction multiplication. We've got 4/3 times 15 over 14. Remember that we do not need a common denominator to multiply and divide, only to add and subtract. Let's see if anything can be reduced. 4 and 3 don't have any common factors. 15 and 14 don't have any common factors, but 4 and 14 do. 4 and 14 are both divisible by 2. So essentially what we're doing is reducing early. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 15 and 3 have a common factor of 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 15 divided by 3 is 5. You don't have to rewrite this, but I want to show you what's happening. What we're left with is 2 over 1 times 5 over 7. And we're ready to multiply straight across, and we get 10 over 7. It is not necessary to turn this into a mixed number. You can leave it as an improper fraction. Let's try this one, 9/8 times 6 over 7. Let's look for things that can be reduced. 9 over 8 cannot be reduced. 6 over 7 cannot be reduced. 9 and 7 don't have any common factors, but 8 and 6 do. 8 and 6 are both divisible by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So what I'm left with now is 9 over 4 times 3 over 7, and I'm ready to multiply straight across. 9 times 3 is 27. 4 times 7 is 28, so we have 27 over 28. All right, you need a new heading, reciprocal of a number. All right, reciprocal of a number is something that we need to be able to divide. So I want you to write this down. The reciprocal is just the flip of the fraction. So for this first one here, the reciprocal of 4/9, we just flip that over and it's 9 over 4. But what about for a whole number? Well, remember earlier we learned that we can write a whole number as a fraction by writing it as 16 over 1. So the reciprocal would become 1 over 16. So we would write 1 over 16 for this. You pause the video and try these two on your own. You should have rewritten that as 17 over 1, and then the reciprocal should have become 1 over 17. The reciprocal of 1/10 is 10 over 1. Nice job. All right, you need a new heading. Division of a whole number and a fraction. So let's think about what we can write without having to write all of this down. So you don't need to write 2 divide fractions if you've written your heading here. The heading should already be written down. I want you to write multiply the first number by the reciprocal of the second number. Some of you have learned this as keep, change, flip, so you can write that down. So anything that's underlined or boxed, you want to make sure you're writing down in your notes. And don't forget that we can change any whole number to a fraction by making the denominator 1. You don't need to write that down because you should have already written that down earlier. So we want to first rewrite this as 6 over 1. I'm not going to reduce, I'm not going to cancel, I'm not going to do anything until I have multiplied by the reciprocal. The 5/3 stays the same, and I'm multiplying by the reciprocal. Now we can see if there's anything to cancel. 5/3 cannot be reduced, 1/6 cannot be reduced, 5 and 6 cannot be reduced, and 1 and 3 cannot be reduced. So I'm ready to multiply straight across, and that becomes 5 over 18. Notice I never actually divided. Multiplying by a reciprocal is like a trick way to divide without having to actually divide. Pause the video and try this one on your own. You should have first rewritten this as 6 over 1 divided by 7 over 6. And then we keep this one the same. We change the divide to a multiply, and we flip the second fraction. There's nothing to cancel. 6 over 1 can't be reduced. 6 over 7 can't be reduced. 6 and 7 can't be simplified. 6 and 1 can't be simplified. So we're ready to multiply straight across. 6 times 6 is 36. 1 times 7 is 7. Make sure you've paused the video and had all this written down before we move on. You do not need a new heading. We're still working on fraction division, and we're still multiplying the first number by the reciprocal of the second number. We're still talking about keep, change, flip. So if you already have that written down, there's no need to write it again. All right, so now we're going to divide. We're going to keep the first fraction the same. Neither of these are whole numbers, so we don't have to worry about writing anything over 1. We change the divide to a multiply, and we flip the second fraction. Nothing to reduce here, nothing to reduce here, but 9 and 3 have a common factor of 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 8 and 10 have a common factor of 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So what I actually have is times 1/5, and I multiply straight across. 4 times 1 is 4. 3 times 5 is 15. Now we're going to pause the video and you're going to try this one on your own. You should have kept your first fraction the same, you should have changed your divide to a multiply, and you should have flipped your second fraction. You should have checked for things to cancel. 7/3 can't be reduced, 5/6 can't be reduced, 7/6 can't be reduced, 5/3 can't be reduced. So we're ready to multiply straight across. 7 times 5 is 35, 3 times 6 is 18, and we're done there. All right, new heading. We're going to write an improper fraction as a mixed number. Particularly for recipes, it's important to be able to rewrite improper fractions as mixed numbers. You would never say that you would use 3/2 of a cup of flour. Sorry, that should say flour. Instead, you would say 1.5 cups of flour. So to change an improper fraction to a mixed number, so here's what you need to write. Divide, use the remainder as the new numerator, always keep the denominator the same. So remember, you're writing the things that have been underlined so that you have good note-taking skills. Once you have that written and you're ready to move on. So remember, fraction bar is the same thing as divide. It's telling you to divide 28 divided by 9. Top dog goes in the dog house. And then you want to think about how many times 9 goes into 28. 9 goes into 28 3 times. 3 times 9 is 27 with a remainder of 1. So we use the new remainder as the new numerator and keep the denominator the same. The 3 is your whole number, so it's 3 and 1/9 because 9 went into 28 3 whole times with a remainder of 1 that we still wish we could divide by 9, but we can't. You pause the video and try this one on your own. You should have divided 32 by 9. 9 goes into 32 3 times. 9 times 3 is 27. You have a remainder of 5. So you have a whole number of 3. Your remainder should have been 5, and that becomes your new numerator, and your denominator stays the same. So you should have gotten 3 5/9 for that one. Now let's reverse it. New heading, writing a mixed number as an improper fraction. For recipes, you would never use an improper fraction, but we will often change mixed numbers to improper fractions because it makes, it should say calculations, less complicated. To change a mixed number to an improper fraction, so here's what you need to write down. Multiply the denominator by the whole number, add the numerator. Always keep your denominator the same. Your denominator almost never changes if you notice. I think of this as kind of a circle. I'm multiplying and then adding, multiplying, then adding. So 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 plus 2 is 8, so this becomes 8, and then we always keep our denominator the same. You pause the video and try this one on your own. Remember, it's a circle. Multiply and then add. Multiply and then add. 7 times 3 is 21. 21 plus 4 is 25. So that becomes 25/7. And that's our answer there. Make sure to pause the video before you move on. All right, I know this was a long lesson today, but you're done with your fraction module. This video will be available on Haiku if you need to rewatch, and it'll be available on each skill for Module 3 in ALEKS. So now you're going to go to ALEKS, you're going to log on, and you're going to complete Module 3 if you're ready for that. Don't forget that if you need help, you can click on the explanation for each problem. It'll give you a description of what to do, and you can even click on why to get some more information. When you're done practicing all of your topics in Module 3, you'll be ready for your assessment. You're going to go back to the home screen. You're going to click on the circle with 3 lines, and then you're going to click on the assignment. you will need to take module 3, or excuse me, you'll need to take quiz 3 to match with module 3. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day.